Yep, I'm mainly a TypeScript guy. There's no hiding that. But, as the AI ecosystem is evolving and it's becoming more accessible to people, I've basically just been picking up more in Python. I also use it at work a little bit. But this is awesome that I could do this before it would take me hours to get done, right? So I was just like, hey, ChatGPT, give me a step-by-step guide to create a simple Django REST framework API with a single endpoint to upload documents matching the following criteria. The model should have a primary key as a UUID, uploaded at, created at, and a file key. Endpoint should accept a PDF file. So very simple criteria. Obviously, ChatGPT very happily goes ahead and gives us the instructions. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to install some packages, which are Django and Django REST framework. Then we're going to go in and create a new project. And we're going to CD into that project. Then we're going to create a new app by doing Python manage.py, start app, documents. Once we've created, that's just going to create a big directory for us and with everything already there. And we're just going to follow the instructions, right? We have to make sure we add the app, the project that we just created into our installed apps in settings.py. We're going to create a very simple model. As you see, meeting the criteria that we specified above. ID, uploaded at, created at, file key, and the ID is also a UUID, which is pretty cool, right? It also sets it to default, which means that when a value is inserted into the database, it'll automatically populate that for us. Then we move on to creating a serializer. Serializer is going to serialize what we get through our view set. It's going to come from when we make an endpoint call, that endpoint is going to pass it onto the view set. The view set is going to pass it through the serializer to make sure that the values are valid before inserting it into a database. And then we're going to create that view. That view is essentially what I just mentioned, right? This is what let's say we're using Postman. When Postman makes an endpoint call, it's going to hit our URL. Then from our URL, it's going to move into our view set. From our view set, serializer is going to make sure that it's valid, and then it's going to insert it into our database. Then we're going to move on, create a URL configuration in the main big thing that we have. And this is going to be in urls.py. And then in the overall project, we need to include that basically this URL file that we created within our project can work at a global level, right? Then here's one of my favorite parts and favorite features of Django REST framework, which is just its ability to make great migrations. And yes, we can run this manually, but also whenever we run the server, it'll automatically make migrations if it detects changes in the database, and then it'll run those migrations. Then instructions to run the server, and it'll be at this address here, right? And we can test it by using Postman, which we will. So just moving directly into the code, this is what it created for us. This is beautiful. As you can see, if we go to settings, here's where we've added our REST framework. And in my case, I called the project differently, Archivos API. This is for a side project that I've been working on. Small tweaks that I did that weren't in the instructions, just things that I've, practiced for me, a habit, is I've added a Docker Compose file to create a database locally so we can test our changes. And I've also added a requirement.txt file. Something is, obviously, if you're using a Postgres database, in your settings, you're going to have to change this. I think by default comes from SQLite. So I've changed it to be Postgres, and I've given it my Postgres credentials, which is all local Postgres, local host. And this matches exactly what I have in my Docker Compose file. But enough of that. Let's dig in directly into the main folder. So here we're going to have all this created for us. So here's the model. Exactly. I literally just copy pasted it directly. As you can see, ID, file key, uploaded at, created at. Then the serializer, just made small tweaks here and there, but overall same image. This is still covering everything that was covered with the ChatGPT answer. I barely modified it. Then this is our views, and this is exactly what's going to happen here is once an endpoint call is made, we're going to process that endpoint. And one of the cool things is that because this method, perform create, by default, Django ORM acknowledges that whenever there is a perform create within a document view set, it'll say, okay, this is a post call, right? So then we'll do some small validation. Obviously, I'm adding prints here because I want to test things. And then ultimately, we're just going to serialize this, make sure that the values are valid, and we're going to insert it into our database. So just to quickly test this, we're going to move on to Postman. As you can see, here's the database. I have to go back. I want to show you, like, I ran the server and automatically created this migrations for us. This is great Postgres script here. And if you can see, everything's there with the right fields. And whenever we run the server, it's going to automatically run it for us, which is pretty dope. So we have a database, empty. Here's a table that I created that we've added. Then we're going to go to Postman. I have a cool file here. I'm going to hit send. Boom. Created an ID, created, uploaded at, created at. Now, if we go back to our database, there it is. And this is freaking awesome. Obviously, I'm adding a lot more logic, and this is a very simplified version. But it's crazy that, you could do this, and like literally took me 10 minutes to set this up. In the past, it would have taken me hours.